The galaxy was dying and nobody knew how to stop it. Commander Zelnoth stood on the bridge of the Concordat flagship, watching another world fall. The holographic display showed the planet Arthemia, home to 4 billion souls being consumed. The surface rippled and changed as the devourers fed. Within hours, nothing would remain except an empty husk of rock. All ships retreat to safe distance, Zelnoth ordered. His 3 hearts beat irregularly, a sign of stress in his species. He had given this same order 17 times in the past 2 months. 17 worlds lost, 17 civilizations erased. The devourers had appeared 6 months ago from beyond the edge of known space. Nobody knew where they came from or what they wanted. They simply consumed. They were like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Creatures that seemed to be part machine, part living tissue, able to change their shape and adapt to any weapon used against them. The Concordat had tried everything. Plasma weapons worked for one battle. Then the devourers adapted and became immune. Kinetic missiles destroyed them once, but by the next encounter, their hulls had evolved to absorb the impact. Even the ancient Archeans, who had protected the galaxy for thousands of years, fell silent after attempting to negotiate. Their homeworld was now a graveyard. In the war room of the Concordat Central Command, the High Council gathered. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the chamber, their voices rising in panic and desperation. "We must evacuate the core worlds," insisted Representative Thala, her crystalline form flickering with fear. "Move our populations to the outer rim. And how long before they follow us there?" countered Admiral Vortek. "They have consumed everything in their path. Running only delays the inevitable." The debate raged for hours until the science director, an elderly Viridian named Corsol, raised his hand for silence. "There may be another option," he said quietly. "We found something in the outer terminus sector." The holographic display shifted to show a massive ship drifting in the darkness of space. It was old, ancient by most species standards, but its hull was intact, and low-power readings showed it was still functional. "What is it?" asked the council leader. "A human colony ship," Corsol replied. "The U.S. Perseverance. According to our databases, it left Earth approximately 400 years ago. Our scans show 50,000 humans in cryosleep inside." A murmur spread through the chamber. Everyone knew about humans, though most had never seen one. The records described them as dangerous, a species that had nearly destroyed itself through constant warfare before leaving their homeworld. The Concordat had monitored humanity's departure but lost track of their colony ships decades ago. Most assumed they had all perished in the void. "Why would we wake them?" Representative Thala asked. "What could humans do that we cannot?" Corsol pulled up files from the ancient archives. Images appeared showing human history. Wars fought with primitive weapons, then advanced ones. Cities destroyed, rebuilt, and destroyed again. A species that seemed unable to stop fighting even against themselves. "Humans have one trait that may be valuable," Corsol explained. "They never surrender. Their military history shows they fought wars they couldn't win, survived conditions that would break other species, and developed tactics that defied all logical analysis. They are unpredictable, creative, and exceptionally skilled at violence. That's precisely why they're dangerous," Thala argued. "We would be unleashing one threat to fight another." Admiral Vortek studied the ship on the display. "I have read the human military records. They practice something called total war, the complete mobilization of society for conflict. They fought not just for territory or resources, but for ideas. For survival. Perhaps that is what we need now. Not warriors who follow protocols, but survivors who will do anything to win." The debate continued through the night. Some argued that waking humans would be like releasing a virus to cure a disease. Both deadly, both uncontrollable. Others insisted they had no choice. The devourers would reach the core worlds within 6 months. After that, galactic civilization would collapse. Finally, Council Leader Maratok called for a vote. "All in favor of reviving the human ship?" The vote was close, but the decision was made. They would wake the humans. 3 days later, a Concordat fleet surrounded the Perseverance. Science vessels attached umbilical cables to the colony ship's hull, feeding power into its dormant systems. Engineers worked to access the cryo bay controls, carefully bringing the temperature up from near absolute zero. On board the Concordat flagship, Ambassador Kelthar prepared himself for first contact. He had studied everything available about human psychology, though the information was limited. Humans apparently valued directness and honesty, so he would tell them the truth immediately. The first cryopod to open contained a woman in military uniform. She gasped as the preservation gel drained away, her muscles spasming as blood flow returned. Medical drones moved in to assist, but she waved them away, forcing herself to stand on shaking legs. "Report," she said, her voice rough from disuse. "Where are we? What's our status?" A human language translation device rendered her words into Galactic Standard. Kelthar stepped forward. "My name is Ambassador Kelthar of the Viridian Republic. You are in concordate space. Your ship has been drifting for 380 years. I regret to inform you that Earth is gone, destroyed by environmental collapse shortly after your departure. You are among the last surviving humans in the galaxy." The woman stared at him, her face unreadable. Around the cryo bay, other pods began to open. More humans emerged, looking around in confusion. "My name is Commander Sarah Chen," the woman said. "I was senior military officer on this vessel. You said Earth is gone. How many humans survived?" "Unknown," Kelthar replied. "Several colony ships launched, but most are presumed lost. Yours is the first we have found intact." Chen closed her eyes briefly, processing this information. When she opened them again, they were hard and focused. "Then why did you wake us? You didn't go to this trouble out of kindness." Kelthar appreciated her directness. "You are correct. We need your help. An enemy called the Devourers is destroying our civilization. We have lost 17 worlds. Our military cannot stop them. We hoped humanity might offer a different perspective." Chen looked at him for a long moment. "Show me everything. I want tactical data, ship specifications, recordings of every engagement. If we're going to help, I need to know what we're facing." Within hours, the command center of the Perseverance was filled with awakened humans reviewing holographic displays. They watched in silence as the recording showed worlds being consumed, fleets obliterated, billions dying. Colonel Marcus Webb, the chief military strategist, finally spoke. "You've been fighting them for 6 months?" "Yes," Kelthar confirmed. "And in that time they've adapted to every weapon system you've used?" "Correct," Webb shook his head. "You're not just losing. You're teaching them how to kill you more efficiently. Every time you engage, they learn. You're training your own executioners." The concorded officers shifted uncomfortably. Webb's words were brutal, but accurate. Commander Chen studied the tactical displays. "You fight with honor. Predictable engagement patterns, established protocols, rules of warfare." She looked up at Kelthar. "That's your problem. You're fighting fair against an enemy that doesn't care about fairness." "What would you suggest?" Kelthar asked. Chen's smile was cold. "We stop fighting fair. We use tactics that don't make sense, strategies that violate logic. We become unpredictable, irrational, and dangerous. That is not how civilized species conduct warfare," Kelthar protested. "No," Chen agreed. "But civilized species are losing. We're not civilized, Ambassador. We're survivors, and survival doesn't follow rules." As she spoke, alarms blared throughout the fleet. A Devourer scout vessel had emerged from faster-than-light travel, its sensors scanning the gathered ships. "All vessels, prepare to retreat," Admiral Vortek ordered through the communications channel. But Commander Chen had already reached the Perseverance's helm controls. "Negative. All hands prepare for impact. We're going to ram them." "Commander, that's suicide," Kelthar shouted. Chen began entering commands. "Maybe, but they've never seen prey fight back. Let's give them something new to think about." The Perseverance's engines roared to life for the first time in centuries, accelerating toward the Devourer vessel at impossible speed. The collision lit up space like a newborn star. The Perseverance, moving at relativistic speed, struck the Devourer vessel with the force of a nuclear explosion. Both ships disintegrated in an instant, reduced to superheated plasma and debris. On the Concordate flagship, Kelthar stared at the empty space where Commander Chen had been moments before. 3,000 humans had died in that attack. He felt sick. "Why?" he whispered. "Why would she do that?" Colonel Webb stood beside him, his face carved from stone. "Because it worked. Look at your sensors." Kelthar checked the readings. The Devourer vessel had hesitated for nearly 5 seconds before the collision, an eternity in combat. It had paused, confused by prey that attacked instead of fleeing. That hesitation had been fatal. She bought us time, Webb said quietly, and she proved something important. They can be surprised. They can make mistakes. That means they can be beaten. News of the human sacrifice spread across the concordant networks within hours. Species that had resigned themselves to extinction felt something they hadn't felt in months: hope. The humans had shown them that the Devourers weren't invincible. The remaining 47,000 humans from the Perseverance were distributed across concordant space. Military commanders requested human advisors. Planetary defense forces wanted human tactical instructors. Everyone wanted to learn how these strange newcomers thought about warfare. Lieutenant Commander James Ruiz found himself assigned to the defense of Kelmar Prime, a world of crystalline towers and floating gardens. The local military commander, General Thross, was skeptical. "What can you teach us that we don't already know?" Thross asked, his mandibles clicking with irritation. Ruiz pulled up a holographic display of the planet. "You've fortified your cities, positioned your fleets in standard defensive formations, and prepared evacuation protocols. It's textbook defensive strategy." "Exactly," Thross said proudly. "Which means it's predictable," Ruiz continued. "The Devourers will know exactly what to expect. Let me show you something different." Over the next 3 weeks, Ruiz trained a team of volunteers in what he called asymmetric warfare. They didn't practice frontal assaults or defensive positions. Instead, they learned to hide, to deceive, to strike from unexpected angles. When the Devourers came to Kelmar Prime, they found a world that appeared to be in chaos. The military forces fled in apparent panic. The cities seemed abandoned. The Devourers landed, beginning their consumption process. That's when Ruiz's team struck. They had hidden among the civilian refugees, carrying no obvious weapons. Once inside the Devourer perimeter, they sabotaged resource processing centers with subtle malfunctions, power fluctuations that cascaded through systems, causing failures that appeared accidental. The Devourers spent days trying to understand what was wrong with their equipment, never suspecting sabotage. By the time they realized they'd been deceived, Ruiz's team had escaped with detailed scans of Devourer communication systems and biological samples. "You used our civilians as cover," General Thross said afterward, his voice filled with horror and admiration. "That violates every protocol of warfare." "It saved your world," Ruiz replied simply. "The Devourers left when they couldn't figure out what was wrong. They'll mark this system as problematic and move to easier targets. You're safe, at least for now." Stories like this spread throughout the concordant military. Humans didn't fight the way civilized species did. They cheated, they lied. They used tactics that seemed dishonorable or insane, but they won. General Sofia Ramirez was the one who proposed Operation Broken Arrow. She stood before the High Council, her proposal displayed for all to see. "We need to understand how the Devourers think," she explained. "To do that, we need to observe them in detail during a full planetary consumption. I propose we deliberately sacrifice one star system, evacuate most of the population, and let the Devourers attack while we watch and record everything." The council chamber erupted in outrage. Ambassador Kelthar stood, his voice shaking. "You're proposing we feed them an entire world? Billions of lives." "We'll evacuate as many as we can," Ramirez said calmly. "But yes, some will die. The Devourers have already taken 17 civilizations. Billions are already dead. If sacrificing one more world gives us the information we need to stop them, then it's a price we should pay." "This is barbaric," Representative Thala said. "No civilized species would even consider such a plan." Ramirez's eyes were cold. "Then it's fortunate you woke humans, isn't it? Because we're not civilized, we're survivors, and survivors do what's necessary." The vote was close, but Operation Broken Arrow was approved. The Drothi homeworld was chosen, partially evacuated, though thousands refused to leave or couldn't escape in time. Concordant forces staged an elaborate last stand that appeared desperate, but followed predictable patterns. The Devourers took the bait. They descended on the Drothi homeworld with overwhelming force, beginning the consumption process. Hidden throughout the system, stealth drones recorded everything: attack patterns, communication frequencies, biological processes at the cellular level. Dr. Amara Okafor watched the data stream in from her laboratory aboard a human science vessel. She was a xenobiologist, one of the few on the Perseverance who had been revived specifically for her scientific expertise. rather than military value. "They're sharing information," she said, her eyes widening as she analyzed the readings. "Look at this. When one devourer learns something, they all learn it. It's a hive mind with genetic memory." Colonel Webb, observing from the command deck, leaned forward. "That's how they adapt so quickly. They're not individual units learning. They're a single intelligence gaining experience." "Exactly," Okafor confirmed. "But it's also a vulnerability. If they share everything through genetic memory, that means we could create a virus that spreads through their entire species. One infected devourer could carry it to all of them." The implications were staggering. A biological weapon that could target the devourer's hive mind would effectively kill the entire species at once. It would be genocide on an unprecedented scale. Kelthar, monitoring the conversation, felt his blood run cold. "You're talking about biological warfare. That's forbidden under galactic law. It's considered a crime against all sentient life." "Your laws were written for a galaxy at peace," Webb replied. "This is extinction-level warfare. Normal rules don't apply." The debate that followed was fierce. Many concordate species refused to participate in developing a biological weapon, citing moral and ethical concerns. But the humans didn't hesitate. They had used such weapons before, in their own ancient history. They knew the terrible cost, but they also knew desperation. Dr. Okafor worked with a team of human scientists in secret, developing a pathogen specifically designed to exploit the devourer's genetic memory network. It took weeks of careful research, using the samples that Ruiz's team had captured on Kelmar Prime. Ambassador Kelthar confronted Colonel Webb in the human quarters one evening. "You're creating something that will haunt the galaxy forever. If you release this weapon, you'll be responsible for the complete extinction of a species." Webb met his gaze without flinching. "I know. We've done it before on Earth. We drove dozens of species to extinction through carelessness or intent. We nearly did it to ourselves. You think I don't understand the weight of what we're doing?" "Then why proceed?" Kelthar demanded. "Because the alternative is worse," Webb said quietly. "If we don't stop the devourers, they'll consume the entire galaxy. Every species, every world, every civilization gone. At least this way something survives. Maybe it's not the moral choice, but it's the survival choice. And that's what humans do best. We survive." Meanwhile, the Concordate began searching through ancient archives, looking for more information about humanity's past. What they discovered disturbed them. Humans hadn't left Earth because of environmental collapse. That was only part of the truth. They had fled because they had nearly destroyed themselves through nuclear war, biological weapons, and AI conflicts. The last Earth government had exiled the colony ships, hoping to give humanity a chance at redemption away from their own destructive nature. The humans aboard the Perseverance didn't know this history. Their databases had been sanitized before launch, designed to give them a fresh start. But now the Concordate understood what they had truly awakened. A species that had almost extinguished itself through warfare, now armed with advanced technology and a new enemy to fight. Representative Thala spoke before the High Council. "We created this situation. We woke them because we were desperate. Now we must accept the consequences. The humans are our weapon against the devourers, but what happens when the war is over? What will we do with a species that fights not just to win, but to annihilate?" The question hung in the air unanswered. Because first they had to survive, and for that, they needed the weapon the humans were creating. The pathogen was ready. Dr. Okafor held the containment vessel in her hands, feeling its weight. Inside was something that could save the galaxy or damn humanity forever. The virus was elegant in its design. It would spread through the devourer's genetic memory network, causing cellular degradation at an exponential rate. Once infected, a devourer would carry the disease to every member of its species within days. "It's genocide in a bottle," she said softly. Colonel Webb stood beside her in the laboratory. "Yes, but it's also salvation. The question is whether we're willing to pay the price for it." The High Council gathered to hear the final report. Dr. Okafor presented her findings, explaining how the pathogen worked and what it would do. The chamber was silent as species representatives processed the implications. "There's one problem," Okafor continued. "The virus needs to be delivered directly to a devourer nexus hub, one of their central coordination points where thousands of them connect to share information. Someone has to fly into heavily defended devourer territory, penetrate their defenses, and release the pathogen before being killed. It's a one-way mission. "You're asking for a volunteer to commit suicide," Kelthar said. "Yes," Webb replied bluntly. "We are." When the call for volunteers went out to the human contingent, every single person raised their hand. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, civilians, all of them willing to die if it meant stopping the Devourers. Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka was chosen. He had been a botanist before cryosleep, someone who studied growing things and creating life. Now he would deliver death on an unimaginable scale. He accepted the mission without hesitation. "Why did you volunteer?" Kelthar asked him the night before the mission. Tanaka looked out at the stars through the observation window. "When I went into cryosleep, my wife and daughter stayed on Earth. They weren't chosen for the colony ship. I thought I'd see them again someday, that maybe Earth would recover and we'd reunite. But they've been dead for 400 years. Everyone I loved, everything I knew, gone. What else do I have left except to make their deaths mean something?" The next morning, Tanaka climbed into a small stealth craft loaded with the pathogen. The ship was designed for infiltration, not combat. Its only defense was the ability to hide and run. As he launched, the Concordat fleet wished him luck. Human and alien crews alike knew they were watching someone fly to their death. The journey took 3 weeks. Tanaka navigated through Devourer-controlled space, using asteroid fields for cover and debris from destroyed ships as camouflage. He recorded messages each day, thoughts on sacrifice, duty, and what it meant to be human. He talked about his family, about Earth, about the garden he'd planned to grow on the new colony world he'd never reached. "If anyone finds these recordings," he said on day 12, "know that I wasn't afraid." Sad, yes. Lonely, definitely, but not afraid. Humans are good at dying for things that matter. Maybe that's our real gift to the galaxy. Twice he nearly got caught. Once, a Devourer patrol passed within meters of his hiding spot inside a destroyed freighter's hull. He held his breath, watching through sensors as the alien vessel scanned the debris field. It moved on, unaware of his presence. On day 19, he reached the Nexus. It was massive, a biological structure the size of a small moon, pulsing with billions of interconnected Devourer consciousnesses. Energy readings showed intense activity as information flowed between individuals at incredible speeds. Tanaka armed the pathogen release system and set his ship on a collision course. There was no turning back now. The stealth systems failed as he accelerated, and Devourers immediately swarmed toward him. His last transmission was simple: for Earth, for those who came before, and for those who will come after. Tanaka out. The ship impacted the Nexus, rupturing on contact. The pathogen released in a cloud of microscopic particles that the Devourers immediately absorbed. Within seconds, infected individuals began spreading through the Nexus. Within minutes, the virus had spread to thousands of Devourers. Within hours, it had reached millions through their shared genetic memory. The Concordat monitored Devourer movements across the galaxy, watching for any change. For the first 3 days, nothing seemed different. Then reports started coming in. A Devourer fleet in the Sigma sector had broken formation, ships moving erratically before powering down completely. Another group in the Delta Quadrant showed signs of systems failure, their organic components degrading, their mechanical parts seizing up. Across dozens of systems, Devourers began dying. "It's working," Dr. Okafor said, watching the data streams. But her voice held no triumph, only sorrow. The pathogen spread faster than anyone had predicted. The Devourers' strength, their ability to share information instantly across their entire species, became their weakness. Every Devourer that connected to the hive mind became infected. Every new infection spread to countless others. Within a week, Devourer forces across the galaxy were in full retreat, fleeing toward the dark space beyond the galactic rim. They weren't attacking anymore. They were trying to escape something they couldn't fight or adapt to. For the first time since they'd appeared, the Devourers were the ones running. Within 2 weeks, Devourer activity had ceased entirely. Scout ships sent to investigate found only corpses, ships drifting with dead crews, stations filled with decomposing biomass, entire fleets reduced to floating graveyards. The galaxy celebrated. Billions of beings rejoiced at their survival. Parades filled the streets of core worlds. The Concordat declared a day of remembrance for all who had died, including the humans who had sacrificed themselves. But in the human quarters aboard the Concordat core station, the mood was somber. The remaining 39,000 humans gathered in silence, watching recordings of the dying devourers on display screens. "We did that," said Private Maria Santos, her voice barely a whisper. "We erased an entire species from existence. They were killing us," Colonel Webb replied. "It was them or the galaxy." "I know," Santos said. "But look at them. Look at how they died. They were running, terrified, trying to escape. We turned predators into prey and then we exterminated them. Completely. There's not a single devourer left alive in the entire galaxy." Dr. Okafor turned away from the screens. "We brought our ghosts with us from Earth. Every species humanity drove to extinction through carelessness or cruelty. We've added one more to that list. Except this time we did it deliberately." The celebrations in the Concordat continued, but behind closed doors a different conversation was happening. The High Council met in secret session, and the topic wasn't the devourers. It was humanity. "They saved us," Representative Thala admitted, "but they did it by crossing lines we would never cross. They used biological weapons. They committed genocide. What do we do with the species capable of such actions?" Admiral Vortek, who had fought alongside humans throughout the war, spoke carefully. "They are dangerous, yes, but they are also effective. More importantly, they are willing to sacrifice themselves for others." Commander Chen died ramming a devourer ship. Lieutenant Tanaka died delivering the pathogen. Thousands of humans died in missions across the galaxy. They didn't fight for territory or resources. They fought for our survival, not their own. "That doesn't change what they are," Thala argued. "Earth exiled them because they nearly destroyed themselves through warfare. We've given them advanced technology and military experience. What happens when they decide we're the enemy?" The debate raged for hours. Some council members wanted to confine humanity to a single system, to limit their access to weapons and ships. Others argued for integration, for making humans full members of the Concordat. Still others suggested the darkest option, that humanity might need to be contained permanently. Ambassador Kelthar listened to it all, growing increasingly troubled. He had fought alongside humans, watched them sacrifice themselves, seen their grief and their determination. They weren't monsters. They were people who had been given an impossible choice and made the only decision they could. Finally he stood. "I have spent months with the humans. Yes, they are capable of terrible violence. Yes, they crossed moral lines we wouldn't cross. But I have also seen them weep for their fallen enemies. I have seen Dr. Okafor sit in her laboratory, crying over the extinction she created even though it saved us all. They carry the weight of what they've done. They don't celebrate genocide, they mourn it even when it was necessary." "Pretty words," Thala said. "But what guarantee do we have that they won't turn on us?" "None," Kelthar admitted. "But we have no guarantee about any species. The difference is that humans have proven they will fight to protect others, not just themselves. They had no loyalty to the Concordat when we woke them. We were strangers who told them their entire civilization was dead. They could have taken their ship and fled to find other human survivors. Instead, they stayed and fought. Many of them died. That deserves more than fear and suspicion." The vote was postponed. The council needed time to decide humanity's fate. Meanwhile, the humans waited, aware that their saviors were now debating whether they were too dangerous to live freely in galactic society. The 39,000 surviving humans gathered in the main assembly hall of Concordat Core Station. They had been summoned for what was simply called the discussion about humanity's future. Everyone knew what it really meant. The galaxy was deciding what to do with them. Admiral Sarah Chen stood before her people. She had survived the ramming attack through pure luck. Her command pod had been ejected automatically when the Perseverance's hull breached. She'd spent 3 days in cryostasis before being recovered. Now she wore the uniform of a Concordat admiral, a rank given in recognition of her sacrifice and leadership. "They're afraid of us," she said simply, "and they have good reason to be. We've shown them what humans can do when pushed to the edge. We've committed acts that will be debated by ethicists and historians for generations. The question before us now is simple. What do we want to be going forward?" General Sofia Ramirez stood. "We should demand recognition, territory, military autonomy, representation in the Concordat leadership. We saved them. We have leverage now. We'd be fools not to use it." Murmurs of agreement spread through the crowd. Many humans nodded, seeing the logic in Ramirez's words. But Colonel Marcus Webb stood next, his expression troubled. If we do that, we become exactly what they fear. We prove that we're conquerors, not partners. Earth's government exiled us because we couldn't stop fighting. If we start making demands backed by military threat, we're repeating the same mistakes that destroyed our homeworld. Dr. Amara Okafor rose to speak. I created the weapon that killed an entire species. Every day I wake up and remember that billions of living beings died because of something I made. Yes, they were attacking us. Yes, it was necessary. But necessary doesn't mean right. I have to live with what I did, and I don't want humanity's legacy to be nothing but destruction. Even justified destruction. Captain Elena Vasquez, who had led a successful defense of the Vega colonies, added her voice. Some of us talked about this. We think we should offer something different. Not demands, not surrender, but partnership. We teach other species how to defend themselves. We share our tactical knowledge freely. We help build a galaxy that can protect itself without needing to become us. That sounds like we're giving away our only advantage, Ramirez countered. Knowledge is power. If we give away what makes us valuable, what's to stop them from casting us aside? Chen listened to the debate, her mind churning. Both sides had valid points. Humans had saved the galaxy and they deserved recognition. But demanding power through intimidation would make them the new threat everyone feared. I propose a vote, she said finally. 3 options. 1. We demand territory and autonomy, making ourselves a power in the Concordat through strength. 2. We accept whatever restrictions they place on us, surrendering our agency for safety. 3. We request equal membership as partners, offering to share our knowledge while accepting oversight and checks on our power. We become teachers and protectors, not conquerors or victims. The voting took hours. Heated arguments broke out as humans wrestled with their future. The first option was tempting, power and security through strength. The second was safety but subjugation. The third was the riskiest. It required trust on both sides. When the votes were counted, option 3 had won by a narrow margin. Humanity would offer partnership, not dominance. The next day, Chen and a delegation of human representatives stood before the High Council. The chamber was packed with observers from hundreds of species, all curious to hear what humanity would demand. Chen began speaking, her voice clear and steady. The Concordat woke us because you were desperate. You needed warriors who could do what civilized species wouldn't do. We did those things. We crossed lines, committed acts that will haunt us forever, and we lost nearly a quarter of our population doing it. We don't regret our actions. The galaxy is alive because of what we did. But we also don't celebrate them. She paused, looking around the chamber. You're debating whether to confine us, control us, or exile us because you fear we might become a threat. That fear is rational. Humans are capable of terrible violence. Our history proves that. But we're also capable of sacrifice, creativity, and adaptation. We can be your weapons or your partners. The choice is partly yours, but it's also partly ours. Representative Thala leaned forward. What is it you want, Admiral? We want membership in the Concordat, Chen said. Not as conquerors or subjects, but as equals. We'll share our tactical knowledge, train your military forces in defensive strategies, help build early warning systems across the galaxy. We'll accept oversight, checks on our power, and monitoring of our activities. We won't demand territory or autonomy beyond what other species have. We're asking you to trust us, and we're willing to earn that trust through transparency and cooperation. And if we refuse? Thala asked. Then we'll leave, Chen replied simply. We'll take our ships and search for other human colony vessels. We'll leave you in peace. But we won't accept being imprisoned for the crime of saving you. Either we're partners or we're strangers, but we won't be prisoners. The High Council debated for 2 days. Some species argued for accepting humanity's offer. Others insisted on stricter controls. Admiral Vortex spoke passionately in humanity's defense, as did Ambassador Kelthar. But others pointed to Earth's violent history, to the biological weapon that had exterminated the Devourers, to the dangerous precedent of allowing such a warrior species free movement. On the 3rd day, the vote was called. The result was close, but ultimately the Concordat accepted humanity's proposal. Humans would be granted full membership, subject to the same laws and oversight as every other species. But there was a condition. A monitoring system would be established, not to control humans but to ensure transparency. Human military activities would be observed, Human scientific research, especially in biological weapons, would be regulated. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. When Chen received the news, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. It wasn't the outcome some humans had wanted, but it was better than being feared and isolated. The integration began slowly. Human military instructors were assigned to concordate training facilities. Dr. Okafor began working with alien scientists on defensive technologies. Engineers helped rebuild worlds damaged by the Devourer attacks. Slowly, humans became part of the broader galactic community. But not everyone was happy. General Ramirez spoke for a faction of humans who felt they had surrendered too much. "We saved them and got nothing but supervision in return," she argued. "We should have demanded more." Chen met with Ramirez privately. "We got survival without becoming monsters," she said. "Earth almost destroyed itself because humans kept fighting for dominance. We have a chance to be something different here. Yes, we could have demanded power. We could have threatened and intimidated. But then what? How long before the galaxy united against us? How long before we became the next threat that needed to be stopped? So we just accept being watched and regulated?" Ramirez asked. "We accept being held accountable," Chen corrected. "There's a difference. They're not afraid of us being strong. They're afraid of us being uncontrollable, so we prove we can control ourselves. We show them that humans can be trusted with power because we understand its cost." Months passed. Human advisors helped prevent 3 potential concordate conflicts through diplomatic solutions suggested by their unconventional thinking. Human engineers developed new shield technologies that saved countless lives during a natural disaster on Thalos 4. Human artists began creating works that blended human and alien aesthetics, building cultural bridges. Slowly, the fear began to fade. Not completely, some species would always be wary of humanity. But it was replaced by something better. Respect mixed with understanding. Admiral Chen oversaw the construction of a memorial station in the outer terminus sector, where the Perseverance had first been found. The station served multiple purposes: a museum documenting the war against the Devourers, a research facility, and a memorial to all who had died, human and alien alike. On the memorial wall, Chen personally inscribed Lieutenant Tanaka's name alongside millions of others. She placed her hand on the cool metal, remembering the botanist who had carried death across the stars to save life. "We did it," she whispered. "We survived. And maybe, just maybe, we learned something too." 5 years had passed since the Devourers fell. The galaxy had rebuilt, scarred but surviving. The 17 worlds that had been consumed remained empty husks, monuments to the cost of survival. Some species wanted to terraform them, to reclaim what was lost. Others argued they should remain untouched, reminders of what nearly happened. Humanity had spread across concordate space, integrating into galactic society in ways both expected and surprising. Human military academies trained officers from dozens of species in tactical thinking and crisis response. Human engineers worked on infrastructure projects across hundreds of worlds. Human artists, musicians, and philosophers contributed to a cultural renaissance as different perspectives blended and created something new. But not all humans had chosen integration. General Ramirez had taken 2 ships and 5,000 followers to search for other lost human colony vessels. They had found 3 so far, 2 intact, 1 destroyed by a spatial anomaly. Another 12,000 humans had been revived, doubling Earth's surviving population. These new arrivals faced the same choice their predecessors had: integrate into galactic society or remain separate. Most chose integration, but a growing minority wanted something else: a human homeworld, a place they could call their own. The Concordate granted them a system on the outer rim, far from the core worlds. New Earth, they called it, though the planet bore little resemblance to humanity's lost cradle. Admiral Chen visited New Earth once, watching as humans built cities and farms, creating something that felt like home. She understood the desire but didn't share it. For her, home wasn't a place anymore. It was purpose. In her office aboard the memorial station, Chen reviewed reports from across the galaxy. Human advisors were helping mediate a territorial dispute in the Karathi system. A joint human Viridian research team had discovered a new propulsion technology. A human cultural exchange program was teaching alien children about Earth's lost history, while learning about their civilizations in return. It was progress, slowly building trust and partnership. But Chen knew it was fragile. One incident, one human acting recklessly or violently, could unravel years of work. Her thoughts were interrupted by an urgent communication from Ambassador Kelthar. "Admiral, we have a situation. You need to see this immediately." The holographic display showed a region of space beyond the galactic rim, the same dark space from which the Devourers had emerged. Concordat long-range sensors had detected something. Massive energy signatures unlike anything previously recorded. Dozens of them moving slowly but deliberately toward the galaxy. "What are we looking at?" Chen asked, though she already suspected the answer. Kelthar's face was grim. "We sent stealth probes to investigate. They found structures, ships, stations, something. The technology is far beyond what the Devourers possessed. And Admiral, we found something else. Biological remains that match Devourer genetic markers." Chen felt ice in her veins. The Devourers were running from something. "Yes," Kelthar confirmed. "Whatever they fled from, it's coming here now. We estimate it will reach the outer colonies within 6 months." The High Council convened an emergency session. The same representatives who had debated humanity's fate 5 years ago now faced a new existential threat. The recordings from the probes played on massive displays, images of vessels that dwarfed anything in the Concordat fleet, stations that looked like small moons, and energy readings that suggested weapons capable of destroying planets. Panic filled the chamber. Some species called for immediate evacuation of the outer rim. Others wanted to send diplomats to attempt peaceful contact. Still others argued for militarization, building fleets and weapons to defend against the coming threat. Representative Thala stood, her crystalline form flickering with agitation. "We survived the Devourers only to face something worse. How do we fight an enemy we don't understand? An enemy that made the Devourers flee?" Admiral Vortek looked at Chen. "Admiral, your people have experience with impossible situations. What would humans do?" Chen studied the data, her mind working through possibilities. The old instinct kicked in, the human tendency to analyze threats and look for weaknesses. But this time something was different. This time she didn't immediately jump to warfare. "We need information," she said finally. "We don't know if they're hostile. The Devourers might have attacked them first. We don't know their motivations, their capabilities, or their intentions. Before we prepare for war, we should try to understand what we're facing." "And if they are hostile?" Thala asked. "If understanding them costs us time we can't afford to lose?" "Then we'll fight," Chen replied. "But we fight smarter. The Devourers adapted to every weapon we used. Whatever's coming might do the same. We need to prepare not just militarily, but strategically. Early warning systems, evacuation protocols, defensive networks. We build layers of protection while seeking diplomatic contact." The Council approved a multi-pronged approach. Diplomatic vessels would attempt first contact with whatever was approaching. Military forces would fortify the outer rim. Science teams would study the probe data for any weakness or pattern, and human advisors would help coordinate it all. But Chen had another idea, one she discussed privately with Dr. Okafor and Colonel Webb. "The Memorial Station has the most complete records of the Devourer War," she explained. "Every battle, every tactic, every piece of intelligence we gathered. We should make those records public, available to every species in the Concordat." Webb frowned. "That includes our biological warfare research. The pathogen that killed the Devourers. You want to give that information away?" "I want transparency," Chen said. "Yes, it's dangerous. Yes, someone could use that knowledge to create weapons, but secrets create suspicion. If we're going to build real trust with the Concordat, we need to show we have nothing to hide." Okafor nodded slowly. "The genie is already out of the bottle. Anyone with enough resources could reverse engineer what we did. Better to be open about it and help develop ethical guidelines for such research." The decision was controversial among humans. Many feared it would make them vulnerable, expose their methods, or enable future enemies. But the majority agreed. Transparency was the price of trust. When the Memorial Station opened its complete archives to public access, it sent shockwaves through the Concordat. Species that had feared human secrecy now saw everything. The debates over using biological weapons, the cost of Operation Broken Arrow, the private messages of humans wrestling with moral choices. It wasn't all flattering. It showed humans at their worst as well as their best, but it also showed something else. Humanity's capacity for self-reflection, for questioning their own actions, for carrying the weight of difficult choices. They weren't monsters who killed without thought. They were people who made terrible choices and lived with the consequences. The first contact vessel was a joint operation. Human, Viridian, and Archean crew members working together. Captain Maya Chen, granddaughter of Admiral Chen, commanded the ship. She had been born during the Devourer War, part of the first generation of humans who never knew Earth, who grew up in galactic society. Maya had inherited her grandmother's analytical mind but lacked the cynicism that came from war. She believed in peaceful solutions, in diplomacy over violence. Her crew reflected that philosophy, explorers and scientists rather than warriors. As they approached the edge of known space, sensors detected the first of the massive structures. It was enormous, easily 50 times the size of the largest Concordat station. Energy readings showed it was active, but it hadn't made any hostile moves. Broadcast first contact protocols, Maya ordered. All languages, all frequencies. Mathematical sequences, cultural greetings, everything. They waited. Minutes turned to hours. The structure remained silent. Then finally a response. Not in any known language, but in pure mathematics. Equations and sequences that transcended linguistic barriers. The translation computers worked to decode the meaning. It was a question elegant in its simplicity. Why did you destroy the harvesters? The harvesters. That's what they called the devourers. Maya felt her pulse quicken. This was the moment that would determine the future of the galaxy. Prepare a response, she told her communications officer. We need to explain what happened, why we had no choice. But we also need to take responsibility for what we did. The message they sent was honest and complete. They explained how the devourers, the harvesters, had attacked the Concordat, how they had consumed 17 civilizations, how humanity had been awakened to help defend against an existential threat. They described the biological weapon, the extinction of an entire species, and the weight of that choice. They also sent something unexpected, the complete historical records from the memorial station. Every battle, every decision, every moment of doubt and determination. They hid nothing. The response took days to arrive. When it did, it changed everything. The harvesters were outcasts from our civilization, the message explained. They violated our laws, consumed worlds without permission, and fled when we attempted to contain them. You did what we could not. You stopped them permanently. This was not murder. This was justice, delivered by those who had no obligation to do so.